Welcome to Women in B2B Marketing, a show where CMOs, VPs of marketing, and all strong women leaders in B2B discuss their top tactics, strategies, and tips for building high-performing teams, leveraging trends, and ultimately rocking their marketing careers. Made by and for women, insightful for all. I'm your host and 15-year B2B marketer, Jane Serra. Let's dive in. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us for another episode of Women in B2B Marketing. Today we have with us the amazing Catherine Solazzo, CMO at Syntax, and we're going to get into CMO and her role and how she has a very cool take on the CMO role. We'll get into that. She has 20 years of experience in IT across marketing, sales, and digital overall, so different aspects. Excited to tap into that too. But thank you for joining us today, Catherine.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. We have so much to dive into. What I always like to start out with, and this actually is going to be the crux of a lot of our conversation, is how did you get into this world of currently B2B marketing, and what was your path like to get here?
The path was, I think, written in the stars for me. I come from a long line of IBMers, and I think my family has probably over 150 years of
Wow.
service to the company. And
How cool.
yeah, so my parents, my grandparents, my brother's still there. I spent 16 years at IBM. And when
Wow.
I was in college, one of the requirements was to have an internship. And I was currently a communications major. And my dad encouraged me to apply for an internship at IBM Communications and headquarters. And then I just never left. So I became an
Yeah.
intern, and then I joined full time after I graduated. And they just kept offering me wonderful opportunities. And so I wouldn't say there was ever not a path to
Yeah.
B2B. Yeah. So I just grew up in a family where it was comfortable, and I felt like an IBMer from a young age, actually.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Mm.
You must have all the IBM swag
Oh my gosh.
throughout the family.
I made fun of my dad on Father's Day. I think he was wearing a shirt from like 1987 when it was like Ultimedia.
I
So,
love
anyways,
it.
we have a lot of,
Vintage.
yes, exactly.
Oh, that's so cool. And you've held roles in sales and different sides of marketing, of business overall in tech. So
Mhm.
what kind of brought you to marketing itself? And did you always want to be in marketing? And yeah, how'd
Oh,
that go?
I don't even, to be honest, some days I wonder how I arrived here, to be completely honest with you. I started in communications, and I picked communications as a major because I didn't really know what else I wanted to do. And I started as a speechwriter at
Oh,
IBM
wow.
in communications and for executive comms. And it really helped me learn the business, learn how to talk about complex technologies, and really understood how the business ran. And then I had a wonderful leader in a peer organization that I was helping on comms for. And he must have seen something in me. To this day, I'm not quite sure what it was, because I think of myself as this 22-year-old. And I moved into a more technical program management role, and it introduced to me sort of the concepts of marketing, although it was on the tech sales side. And I worked very closely in that role with marketing. And then I picked up a mentor who was at that time the CMO for the Americas. And she, again, mentored me and saw something in me. And then I finally moved into marketing. And so that
Yeah.
was my first introduction formally to the discipline. And I did product marketing there, I did field marketing. And then I got into this executive development program, and that really sent my career in a very different direction. And with that came overseas assignments. I spent 3 years in Tokyo in the marketing
So cool.
function. And so that was, I think, the core years of my experience with marketing. And when I came
Yeah.
back, oftentimes you go get this great international experience, and they want to use you somewhere in the organization because you have so much insight about what it really takes to operate in a market, in a territory, that I took a very different direction. There was an offer to become the chief of staff for the chief digital officer who was brand new to the company. He was previously the
Yeah.
president at AOL,
Oh,
and
wow.
he was new to the company. The whole digital business unit was being created. It's very rare in a company like IBM, over 100 years old, where you create a new business unit. And the role, again, was not marketing. It was about helping him integrate into the company, helping him build a business, a P&L, build a comms strategy, a brand strategy, really start to from a white piece of paper. And that was really
Yeah.
the first time that I understood what it meant to operate a business. And that was a huge experience for me. And from that
Yeah.
role, he deployed me into his organization to lead a global developer function. And again, far removed from marketing. So that gave me
Yeah.
a lot of business skill. And from there, I moved into the business partner ecosystem business. So I would say half my career has been in marketing, and then the other half has been in some different business roles.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very
It's so
interesting.
fascinating. I love the role of chief of staff always intrigues me because
Mm,
it can mean so many different things depending on the organization and
yeah.
who you're supporting. And do you find that your experience, the other half of your experience, so chief of staff and leading all of these different projects and digital and sales, obviously,
Mhm.
as well, all of those, how have they impacted your take on marketing and your just how you CMO?
Oh, yeah, goodness. It certainly gives you a different perspective, because when you're on the receiving end of marketing versus being the one who's leading marketing,
Yeah.
you start to understand. We always joke as CMOs, right? Everyone thinks they're a marketer, and
Yes.
which is true, by the way, that they all
Yes.
do. Sometimes I joke and I'm like, well, I have an opening on my team if you'd like to. But the truth is, there's a different lens you look through when you're on the business side, and the rigor and the pace is very different from what you need to do as a CMO, right? A lot of times
Mm,
we're very 2 quarters ahead, a year ahead focused. We're looking at how do we develop future pipeline? How do we create the awareness out in the market? We have to be more forward looking. On
yeah.
the sales side, it's all about the day, the week, the month, the quarter. And
Yeah.
sometimes those two things are in conflict with each other. So it's very eye opening to understand how to bridge the two. Like, how do you bring the immediate need with looking ahead and making sure that when we get 6 months out, we are prepared and we have sufficient pipeline. So it's
Yeah.
helped me CMO differently for sure, especially in the current
Yeah.
role that I have.
Very cool. Well, speaking of, if I have that correct, this is your first CMO role. So is
Second,
that right?
it's the
Oh,
second.
second.
Mhm.
It is your second. Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So I had that wrong. I'm curious, transitioning into the role of CMO,
Mhm.
how have things changed or what do you look at differently as CMO versus your SVP and VP experience?
Yeah. It's actually interesting. And for me, I came from big tech, big company, big corporate. And in a way, the size and scope of the business that I was leading there was a CMO role.
Yeah.
And that's a realization that happens only when you leave that profile of a company. So I went from big tech to very large enterprise at Tech Data, where I was the SVP CMO for Tech Data. And again, there was a lot of fear for me going into that role, because it's like, oh my goodness, now it's you. There's no one to look to. There, you have to have all of the answers. And the
Yeah.
truth was, it wasn't that much different from a day to day. I was still setting the strategy. I was still working across the business with peers and stakeholders, and
Yeah.
I was still in charge of the direction and vision of the company. The thing that changed was P&L responsibility, for sure,
Mhm.
and more accountability to things like the board. How do we make sure that the investments that we're making are living up to the investments that we've asked for? Especially in this current role, we're private equity owned, we're not a public company. That's also a very big difference to
Yeah.
lead in a senior role for a public company versus private equities. It's very different and eye-opening when you get into that position.
Yeah. I'd love to dive into that a little bit more too. That's a really great point. So, the public company versus PE, what are a couple of the differences for us to be aware of?
So many differences. There's the good and the not so good. On the good side, you're not tied to the quarterly performance. There's so much more flexibility to do the right thing because
Yeah.
you're not living for earnings and you're not trying to make sure we hit that number. And a lot of times we see getting to the number by making cuts, and that
Yeah.
is not as much the routine on the private equity side. If they give you an investment, you agree on the terms, you agree on the ROI and the timeline, and then you go
Yeah.
execute, and you're not distracted by the earnings. We certainly are mindful of the quarterly targets and things like that, but it's a very different experience. So, in that way, I have had the flexibility and the autonomy in this role, being PE owned, to
Yeah.
execute on the transformation that I know is right, not being as distracted. As long as the business side is performing, you have
Yeah.
a bit more flexibility. So that's certainly a difference. And the other side of it is when you're on the PE side, there's not as much legacy history in terms of process and structure and the legacy of the internal motion of the company. That typically comes with a company who's been around longer. So
Yeah.
sometimes you take some of those processes for granted that you now have to build in your new role.
Yes. Yes. I've always found whenever I've worked with people or hired people that came from large companies, and the word legacy rings true here, like that have this huge 100 years plus of processes and development and things that they've ingrained in them.
Mhm.
And then they come to a startup or a smaller company and it's a shock to the
Yeah,
system, right? Because you're like, wait, who's owning this piece of this? It's no, you own all of this, or like
exactly.
what you own is bigger and there's fewer processes. Has that been, I can see it as both, right? It's probably a struggle and an adjustment to not have that in certain ways, but also you get to bring that and create that and build it.
Now that I can take a step back from it, I can see it objectively. It's this very predictable pattern. You come in, you feel like a rock star because you have all of this knowledge, right,
Yeah.
about what to do, how to do it. You want to put these processes in place. You want to build an agile team, and you want to get this talent in and your org structure, all these things. And then you go through what I tell my peer CMOs is the pit of despair, because then you
Yeah.
realize you can't lift and shift all of that. There's certainly
Mm,
learnings, but you have to really adapt also to your new environment, which is they may not be ready for all of those things. And for me, in this particular role, it took me a year to sort
yeah.
through the things that I would take for granted in a large company, like the base infrastructure, the MarTech stack, the talent, the organizational structure that is just there. You're not
Yeah.
having to build that. Now becomes extremely important to you being successful. So I spent a full year rebuilding, really starting with a white sheet of paper on what that would look like. And now,
Yeah.
next month is my 2 year anniversary here. And I said to my boss the other day, I feel like a real CMO now. I can actually do and perform my role, and
Yes.
we're in flow. And so there's a very predictable cycle and timeline
Yeah.
for how to arrive there. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That, so you're bringing up a really great point. When you first come into an organization, and oh, were you there for CMO at Syntax?
Yes.
Is that true?
We never had a
Okay.
CMO. That's a whole other
Yeah.
podcast episode that we could do on being the
Yes,
first CMO.
right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, similarly, along those lines, like, how did you set expectations that
Mm.
the first year is going to be really setting this foundation and starting with a clean slate and growing what you knew you had to have to be successful? How do
Mhm.
you set expectations? And I'm sure you had to deliver some wins along the way while you're
Sure.
establishing this. So, how does that go with talking to your board and your exec team?
It was challenging. I think first and by the way, I should mention that when I was first interviewing for this role, it was not a CMO role. It was
Ah,
scoped as a lower role, and to be honest with you, I wasn't even interested, but it came to a point where the CEO and I realized they needed a CMO, and if they
yeah,
really wanted to do what they were hoping to do for the company, that you needed a different investment level, you needed a different experience level. So when I came in, the first thing I did was I did an assessment, and I had all of the categories: talent, web, technology, compliance, and privacy. There were so many different categories. And then I did an honest assessment and said, here's where you are in the maturity model. And by the
wow,
way, this is the order in which things need to be transformed. And that's how I built my business plan. I said, there are some foundational things that have to happen first in order for us to arrive here. So I laid out the full plan, the timeline, where I would be making investments, where I would be making adjustments, where there were
yeah,
synergies, where there were shifts. I think I was extremely transparent in the beginning about where they were. And I think that was the most important thing is you don't never want to call somebody's baby ugly, but it was my
yeah,
baby, and it was getting everyone on the same page about here's where we actually are. And if you're saying we want to
yeah.
get, here are all of the things that need to happen for us to get there.
Yeah. And was that a struggle? Were people not used to getting such change, or you calling the baby ugly, right? That they've been working with for so long? Or how did you get buy in from all of the different stakeholders on making all of these big changes and this long road ahead?
It was hard. I think when you also come in, there were so many other big transformational things happening in the company. We were very acquisitive, right? There was a lot of other change happening, trying to
Mm,
integrate other companies. There was a lot of brand work that needed to happen. I was creating
yeah.
my own org and P&L, and people were moving out of organizations from others into my team, which can be a very emotional experience. And
Yeah.
things that they were, quote, getting before may not be the things that you're going to be getting now, because the vision of where I want us to be is much further ahead. So I had spent so much time with stakeholders and trying
Yeah.
to educate on marketing. And there was a lot of
Yeah.
perceived knowledge about what they believed marketing was and should be and the value they could get. So there was a lot of discussions where I felt like there were deer in headlights, where I'm coming from one of the most sophisticated set of companies doing
Yeah.
very advanced, very advanced marketing. And I'm coming into an organization that doesn't understand what I mean by first party and third party data, right? So we were very far apart in terms of our understanding of marketing. And I think that was frustrating, but also I knew I needed to take the time to explain to them where we were. So we went from a very events heavy organization, because that was the
Yeah.
capability that we had,
Yes.
to now I'm 6 months into my Sixth Sense deployment for an AI driven, yay, business. And that
Yeah.
was a 2 year transformation, which even for me was too long, but we had to go through the motions to get there.
Yeah, I completely feel that right now. I just started at Daxtra at my
I
company, and
saw.
very
Congratulations.
thank you. And we are historically very events heavy, and we are shifting to ABM. So
Mhm.
I can feel you on that struggle. It's just hard. Everyone left and right getting these new events sent to us that we should be in, and this new partner event, and we should be here. Then all of my budget is gone, folks, if we do
Exactly.
all of these events.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah, it's a mindset shift.
It
But it's
really
great that you
is.
got buy-in from everybody. Are there any tips on how you earned their trust and collaboration throughout this change?
I won't say that I was 100% flawless, because listen, it's
Yeah.
tough. And especially when you're a global company, and should also mention that the company was putting in a global layer at the same time, right? So a
Oh,
lot of
wow. So many
stress
things
of,
at once.
yes, things moving from being regionally owned to now this global layer, and what value will you bring? And so there were other factors happening. My background's communications. And so I leaned very heavily on that. Like,
Yeah.
okay, let's be very clear about what we're doing, when we're doing it. I think for me, data. We could not have emotional discussions, right? There was no historical data, right? There was no
Yeah.
team looking at what actually performed. A lot of it was people felt like this was successful versus was it really? So that was very challenging for me. So I had to lean a lot on external benchmarking and say, this is what the industry says
Yes.
is good. So from here on out, let's use our industry benchmarks as our targets because we have no historical information. That was very important. It was all about the data. It wasn't whether you liked the activity or not, it was
Exactly.
did it perform? And the other thing is, I am in a very, I think, unique position where the CEO is extremely supportive of marketing and
Love it.
helped to give me a lot of air cover because he believed in what we were trying to do. So that made it a lot easier than I think many other
Yes.
CMOs. The other thing was if you say what you're going to do, you have to execute. I never missed a deadline. And I tell my team,
Wow.
we cannot miss on this or we start to lose credibility. So even to this day, we work in an agile fashion. We don't wait to release the most perfect thing. We release small wins along the way. And I think that has helped us quite a bit because we weren't
Yeah.
waiting for some big reveal. It was like, okay, let's start with a campaign. And now let's start to evolve our brand and let's start to sunset some of these other things that are not making us successful. But it wasn't a big band aid. It was, we laid out a timeline and said, here's when we're going to be doing these things and then
Yeah.
never miss. You have to just be consistent. For me,
Wow.
the agile framework is probably the reason that we've been successful. And again, pulling on a non-marketing role that I was in when I was leading that developer business, that's where I learned about it. And
Yeah.
being able to apply some of those other frameworks and methodologies to something like marketing has been extremely helpful.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And just, I love the idea of never missing a deadline. It's
Mm,
setting such a good example, and that
mhm,
establishes that trust over time for
mhm.
sure. Wow, that's amazing. Do you also, taking from the developer side of things, do you have scrums with your team and or daily stand-ups, or do you do any of
Yep.
those things?
We do. We have
Wow.
stand-ups. Yep, we use Trello. So I'm a big tool junkie as well because I think tools help build behaviors. And for us, again, and I've made mistakes, right? I came in the beginning and was like, let's get educated on agile. And everyone was like, what are you talking about? So it has to follow the natural sequence for your team. But we do. We have stand ups. We have what we call diamond teams, teams that work cross functionally. Certainly, some of our teams are, we have different boards for different types of work. So we have web, we've got content for editorial, we have campaign. But those teams, I was joking with my team the other day, I rarely get email from my team because they are almost 100% in Trello, Teams kinds of work environment.
Wow.
And really, only the rest of the business is where I get most of my email from. So that has
Wow.
helped us quite a bit, where the way we work and the
Yeah.
tools we use to support that work has been very important.
That's really great. So all communication is in one place amongst your team and Trello. So what's the word? It just trains everybody to be so in sync with this versus
Yes.
where was that again? And
Yep.
finding things on Slack and then an email, and
Mhm.
everything's just collectively in one spot.
Yep,
That's really
and we
smart.
even have our agencies integrated to our boards as well, which helps a lot because you're not messing around with,
Ah,
certain things. So we have them in our Teams channels, we have them in our Trello boards, and it honestly has made a huge difference in being efficient. And in a second, it kicks off a series of activities, right? You move something
yeah.
from your backlog right into your active board and you assign that out, and it makes me happy. I see the team, like they're all
Yeah.
in there taking responsibility for their part, which is very cool to see.
Yes. Wow. You've built just this machine that's just
Mhm.
easy to check in on and go see. So if anyone asks you a question how XYZ is going, you can
Right
just
on the
pop
board.
right into that.
Yep.
Love
And
that.
and I use it, right? It
Yeah.
takes time away from me to go and ask, "Hey, what's the update? Where is this?" I just go into the Trello board, self-service,
Yeah.
because it's right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
And did that take that must have taken a long time as well to
Yeah.
get into a groove and ingrain in everybody.
Yeah. It did, and even getting new tools in the organization, going through IT, things like that, you take for granted. Again, larger companies who are always looking for the next thing. You now have to drive
Yeah.
that agenda across the
Yes.
business. And yeah, so one of the first things I did was the MarTech stack. That was the first
Yeah.
thing that I put in place because without good tools, the team would not be able to operate efficiently. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
one of the first steps.
So cool.
Yeah.
Another thing that we were touching on before we turned the mics on and that I noticed on I think on your LinkedIn
Mhm.
was that you also lead inside sales and sales ops.
Correct.
Can you walk me through that decision and how that's on your plate and where sales falls in general?
Yeah. Yeah, I have the 3 functions as of this year in January, and it was an evolution, and even in my marketing scope, I've taken on some other things like customer experience and NPS also moved into my
Oh
organization,
wow.
so I've been picking up parts and things.
Yeah.
The way that I built the org structure when I came in was very much aligned to the peers that we have to work with. So our product marketing function mirrored the product management function. So they were a direct plug in to each other. We have a performance team, which is all demand generation focused. We have a web and digital team. We have a dedicated content team. I insourced almost 100% of what we were doing with agencies to build our own internal agency, which has proven
Cool.
to be fantastic because we're not waiting. We have a chief creative director. It's really made a huge difference for us. And then we have an automation team that is doing the everything from HubSpot all the way up to our web technology, WordPress, which we don't love, no offense, but
Yeah.
we're working on it. Now we're working on how do we bring in a CMS and all of these things. So over time, there was a lot of dependency as a CMO, as I'm sure everyone would agree, on our business development reps to make sure that the opportunities and leads that were coming through our funnel were being actively worked by the
Yeah.
BDs. And it's very hard to have influence over an organization that sits somewhere else that is in charge of your success. Really, we could put as many leads through the funnel, and if they weren't converting through the BD team and they weren't focused on those and
Yeah.
putting them in the system correctly. And so there was a lot of discussion about who is overseeing this team. And there were some transformational things that needed to happen, getting them on standard platforms and tools. We had 3 teams globally who were not working in the same way. And they were
Yeah.
not using tools definitions. They weren't compensated the same way. Very challenging for my team to now force fit how we work into them. And I said,
Yeah.
forget it. This is not working. And so this CEO and others, we said, do you want it? And I'm like, yeah. So the inside sales team then moved over. And again, they're hybrid, right? A lot of their work is outbound proactive, but a
Yep.
lot of their work is also doing the lead management for my team. So that happened.
Mhm.
And then there were a lot of discussions because, again, I have a huge tech stack in marketing that my team manages. IT doesn't manage it. And again, that comes with the maturity of being in a large corporation versus a smaller company. And I was struggling with our CRM because our Salesforce environment was not integrated with our HubSpot environment. And I needed visibility throughout the full pipeline, the full life cycle,
Yeah.
right? And I was constantly like, okay, I need this. I need visibility. I need metrics. I need to under. And then it was like, do you want that, dude? So now it makes perfect sense, right? I have three of the four routes to market in my organization because we also handle partner lead management that comes in from our big strategic partners,
Yeah.
SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, AWS. And face to face sales is still in the region. But now, not only do I have responsibility for the key routes to market, but I also have responsibility for the platforms they work in and the reporting that is done. So now I can really
Yeah.
instrument that full funnel. So again, it probably started out being very self serving because I needed to be able to own the strategy of how we were
Yeah.
building that customer experience. And so again, it's probably unique. And listen, there's a lot of things that I deal with now that arguably commission plans and territory
Yeah.
planning and sales methodology, which isn't in my core competency, but now sales enablement is with me and some of these other functions. So it does make sense if you have the ability to flex into some of those non-core marketing capabilities, which I really lean on my past business roles for that.
Yeah. This makes a lot of sense for the orchestration of everything that you're talking
Mhm.
about right now. You not only have the visibility, but the control over these different aspects so you can
Right.
actually deliver across the board.
Exactly.
How is are there other sales teams outside of these orgs that you work with? And how does it do you have a counterpart on the sales team in the C suite or a
Yes.
VP role, or how does that work?
Yes, our structure is we have, again, a global layer. And at that
Yeah.
global layer is myself, CHRO, CFO. We have two COOs for our global delivery, one on the professional services side, one on the managed services side. And then in the regions, those have regional CEOs. And so they are
Okay.
my peers. And in fact, this year, when we built the org strategy for the senior leadership team, we actually made some different categories or clusters of senior leaders. So for us, we have a market cluster, and we're all in charge of driving the business through the market. So it is each of the three regional CEOs and myself. So we are a cluster. And that is
Okay.
how we work together. So they are my peers in the regions, but also the CROs that report to those regional CEOs are where
Okay.
that business development linkage clips in, where that sales operations linkage clips in. Again, having still continuing to evolve our strategy, our engagement model, but we are a bit unique. And think of it this CEO of the region is like the general manager that you would have,
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Yeah. It's so fascinating how large global companies, how you can split things up and how the C suite is so unique and it can be vary. Like the CEO, the CRO reports the CEO regionally. And
Yes.
then, yeah, it's so fascinating.
Mhm.
Do you see your role, and this can be beyond your current positioning and at Syntax, do you see there's a lot of talk on CMOs becoming CROs,
Mhm.
right? Which to me, my biggest question from that route always comes, why do we have to be CMO to then get to CRO, like
Yeah.
a lateral move?
Mhm.
It looks like to me, but I guess it's also seen as a higher step in some ways, which also ruffles my feathers. But I'm curious if you see your position transforming here or in the future into a CRO role and what that would really mean to you. Is that something as a goal or is CMO like the end goal?
It's funny, I've been having this, like, internal existential crisis about this
Yeah.
myself. And a little over a year ago, I was nominated to participate in a program for the Marketing Academy, which is a program, it's a fellowship program for
Oh, cool.
CMOs who want to become CEOs. And
Uh-huh.
and that program changed my outlook. I think CRO to me, depending on where it sits in the organization, is very much a peer role.
Yeah.
I think if you think about the biology of what a CRO is, they are in charge of revenue. I don't
Hmm.
think they are the only person who is in charge of revenue, depending on how you're compensated. I
Yeah.
am like a CRO in many ways for my organization because I have a marketing revenue number. I have an inside sales revenue number. I oversee sales ops, which is in charge of managing the revenue and reporting. So again, I think there's rev ops and then there's revenue responsibility. So I guess I
Yeah.
take those apart. For me, do I want to be a sales leader? No, I don't. It's not in my
Yeah.
career path. Do I want to lead an organization? Yes. And so for me, the path is more to CEO than
Love that.
CRO. And again, it's all about the experiences you collect along the way. And this, for me, is a fantastic platform to understand what does it take to move to a role like that. And listen,
Yeah.
on a Monday, I could be like, yeah, I'm definitely into being a CEO. By Friday, it's
Yeah.
like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sure.
so
It's a roller coaster.
it is a roller coaster, but the point is picking up skills that make you comfortable if that presents itself. And again, those roles have to be right for you. It's not just about working to this title, these three letters. It's about who do you want to be? What types of work do you want to do?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't know. I see a lot of peers out there moving into CRO roles. And I'm like, but you're
Yeah.
not doing anything differently than you were doing before, really. Your title changed.
Yeah.
Maybe your scope
Yeah.
increased, but you were still running that business like a
Yeah.
CRO. And that is the
Yes.
difference now for marketers. It's not just about fun ad campaigns and cool swag or whatever. We're business leaders. And
Yes.
what it takes to run a very sophisticated, in many ways, more sophisticated than a sales function with the technology, the data, the privacy requirements, the forecasting, the funnel management, the conversion rates, and be creative and
Yeah.
do all of the other creative things that are expected out of us and have these big ideas and own the brand. And I heard someone once say that being a CMO is like being a portfolio manager and having all
Yes.
of these different types of things you have to look in and manage. On any given day as a CMO, you're on a call about an ad campaign, you're digging into a platform strategy on how to infuse AI into your organization. You're doing reporting, you're looking at performance of your website, your organic mix. Your brain could explode on the
Yeah.
different dimensions you have to manage on any given day. And I love my sales friends, but at the end of the
Yeah.
day, they're selling. It's pretty
Yes.
one dimensional. And,
Yes.
they of course have to negotiate contracts and things. So they have their own complexity. But for us, we have to interact with so many different parts of the business that you need a very specific personality to be able to operate in that role. And
Mhm.
you need to have this ability to shift at a moment's notice to a very different part of your brain.
Yeah. There's so many different aspects to marketing that are just so different from one another. And you have to have a high level understanding of all of these different components.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the one thing I see a benefit of the shift to more marketers becoming CROs
Yeah.
is when there's organizations that the marketing team reports to the CRO.
Mm,
In that case,
that
I
happens.
love where the
Mhm,
CRO has marketing experience
mhm,
and came from the marketing path
mhm.
for exactly the reasons you just went through. Like you
Right.
just have a wider scope of understanding versus this
Mhm.
just tunnel vision on sales because there's so many different aspects that yes all lead to revenue at the end of the day, that's what we
Mhm.
need to create as a company, but there's so many different aspects to understand. And to me it's just so hard when the marketing team reports to a CRO and the CRO is just from the sales channel.
Yeah.
It's so difficult, there's a big disconnect.
Yeah.
But I love this path to CEO.
Mm.
What is the name of this org again? It's the Marketing Academy. Is that
Yeah,
it?
it's a marketing fellowship program, and it's called the Marketing Academy. Can't recommend it enough. They have
Yeah.
a few different types of programs. They have a scholarship program for aspiring CMOs, and then they have a dedicated fellowship program for CMOs who are pursuing the CEO position. And it's the probably the best education I've ever received, both working very closely with a top consulting firm. I don't know if I can say brand names and things on here, but to provide the education, they set you up with an executive coach. You have CEO
Wow.
mentors from some of the best known brands in the world.
Wow.
The network you build, we have this very active WhatsApp chat, and I'm in the company
Love
of
that.
CMOs who are leading these humongous businesses around the world. It is
Wow.
the best experience I've ever had, and you need that kind of a community to be
Yes.
successful. That's huge, and again, so yeah, shout out to my friends at the Marketing Academy. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. I think this may be the second time I'm hearing of it. I need to look into this.
Mm,
It gave me goosebumps you talking about it in the WhatsApp group and just
yeah.
building this community of peers who get what you're talking
Oh,
about.
yeah.
Yes. Like I've built that over the past couple of years for myself, just
Mhm.
fellow VPs of marketing, SVPs to
Yeah.
just be able to chat about the day to day that only we would understand. Like I'll talk to my husband, but he's not going to get the ins and outs of marketing and
Oh,
the
yeah.
struggles and hitting these targets and our ICP and it's shifting and
Oh, that's
to
amazing.
be able to talk to these peers. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Very cool. And I love the training into a CEO position to
Yeah.
see if that's something that is what you want to do. And I wrote down something that you said that just also hit a nerve or hit something in my heart, really. You have to think about not the title and the acronym, right, of
Mhm.
CRO, CEO, but who do you want to be and what kind of work do you want to do? That's what
Mhm.
you need to think about as you're planning and orchestrating your career along the
Right.
way. I
Yeah,
love that.
because again, think about the role it become once you're in it, it becomes whatever you want it to be. And for me, part of this exploration of do I want to be a CEO is I need different experiences. And my own CEO is very supportive of that, pulling me into M&A, pulling me into how do we position things with investors and giving me an expanded scope. So again, am I CMO? I don't actually, I'm having a bit of an identity crisis. I don't know. I think 90% of my function is probably CMO, but the other half could be a very different title. So I
Yeah.
think when you decide the type of work you want to do, you don't limit yourself and you can
Yes.
pull in other parts, functions, experiences into your daily work. And that really is the most important thing.
Yes. Just keeping yourself open to different opportunities. And it seems like you're throughout your career at IBM and then beyond, it seems like people kept pulling you into because they saw something in you that you were capable of and they wanted
Mhm.
to bring you in to learn. Was is that how do you share with other people to put ourselves in that position where people can identify and want to bring us in and under their wing and train us into these new positions or expose us to new opportunities out there? Any advice on being able to do what you've done there?
I would say it was a very passive thing for me the first half of my career. I didn't know what people saw. Now
Yeah.
I know what it is. I am capable of executing on a transformation and doing it in a very short period of time. And once you know what your thing is, you have to really communicate heavily how you do it and be known for it. So start to build this
Mm,
profile of proof that I've done
yeah.
it here. This is how I did it. This is the outcome I saw. And then be able to apply it to the new situation. And you start to develop this muscle of memory, which is okay, I have a strategy, a blueprint for how I'm going to take these experiences and apply them to this current experience. And I believe that every single role I've had at its core has had the same need, which is to go from here to there. And
Yeah.
and again, then you start to only look at the roles that you're good at. If I stepped into a CMO role where everything was great and going fine, I'm not sure I would have seen myself as successful, and I'm not sure they would have seen me as successful because that's not what I'm good at. I'm good at coming
Yeah.
in and making change. So you have to identify in your own self What is your thing? What are you known for and that you have proof to back up? And then seek those opportunities. And I think I'd be very bored if I was, you
Yeah.
know, operating business as usual.
Yeah. You
Um,
like a challenge. You thrive in chaos.
I do, but yeah, but then you hate yourself and you're like, "Why do I do
Yeah.
this?" And so it's a struggle, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But I love it at the same time.
exactly, exactly.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. I think there's just so much to learn from your journey and what you've learned about yourself. It seems like you have a lot of self reflection, which
Mm,
I appreciate. I need to do more myself. I love that you said you have to find what is your thing and what do you want to be known
mm,
for. We
mhm.
should all take more time to analyze ourselves for that. On the same note, to wrap up the episode, if you could go back in time to little Catherine just starting out as an intern at IBM,
Yeah.
what would you say to her from all of their experience now and what she's about to go through?
Oh gosh, there's probably a laundry list. I think I'd tell myself to the fear and the anxieties I had about not being great were only in my own mind, and to not let that really ruin the experience, because there were so
Yeah.
many times where everyone could tell me I was doing a fantastic job and you're being great and successful and whatever. And I wasn't allowing myself to truly enjoy the hard parts of it and learn. I was torturing myself over that. And I wish I would have been easier on myself through that.
Yeah.
And now I'm learning that you do it enough times, it's, oh, yeah, I forgot. This is going to be really hard for a year. But I wish I was easier on myself early on.
Mm, along the way and
Mhm.
enjoy it in the moment versus once it's done and you're
Yes, exactly.
Oh, thank you. That's beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us and all of the advice and your career path. I think for me, personally, there's just a lot now to reflect on and think about in our own careers. So thank you for planting some seeds of new thoughts and ways of thinking for us.
Of course, anytime. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you. Yes, for sure. And thank you everyone for listening. If you love the episode, connect with Catherine on LinkedIn. Is that the
Mhm.
best way? And also, of course, review the show, rate the show, share the show with a friend. It's how we get more love and in front of more faces. So thank you, everybody.
Bye.